How's it going, folks? So I sat back, watched a man on the street style interview with some gun control activists in Tennessee. Recent protest, but these arguments that they're putting out really aren't recent. And the fact of the matter is that gun controllers really haven't changed much over the years. And we'll get into this while I'm covering these specific arguments. Some of them I've covered in depth in other videos, and some of them might not have discussed quite so much in other videos, but we're still going to get into this. We're actually going to go bottom to top this time, keep it interesting here. So, we'll start off with the other country's argument, because this is a common theme that gun controllers love to say. Other countries have reduced their homicide rates with gun laws. Not true. And this is actually a big thing to break down here. This is quite a bit that goes into this other countries thing. Let's start off with when they say other countries to me, and then I point to several countries that have restrictive or prohibitive gun laws, especially compared to the U.S., and then point out their homicide rates, and their response is to point out the chosen countries the gun controllers point out themselves. So at this point, they really haven't showed what they thought they did for a number of reasons. Because if you actually take the country's homicide rates, so let's say this line and this line are the homicide rates of two of the countries. Well, you know what? I'm not going to actually draw that out because you're probably not going to see it from the camera. But we'll take the homicide rates from the two or three countries that they pointed out as being models for what the U.S. should do. We'll take the U.S. homicide rate, put it next to that, and then take the countries that I pointed out and put it next to the homicide rates of the U.S. and those countries. What often happens is those countries that I pointed out, their homicide rates dwarf the U.S. and those other countries, and then when you look at that in comparison, the homicide rates of the U.S. and those other countries that they pointed out don't seem all that different anymore. The next thing, with a lot of these countries that I like to point to, such as the UK, well, the UK has had a low homicide rate since before all their gun control. The issue is that they just kept passing gun control, and their homicide rates didn't drop. It's just their homicide rates were already low. You take Canada, Australia. Again, you look at their historical homicide rates, and they were always low, even before they had all the restrictive gun laws. So, again, they're not having the correlation that they think they have. Now, they take a country like Japan, and Japan's always had a low homicide rate, and always had restrictive weapons laws. It's kind of been part of the Japanese culture. That wasn't, by the way, those weapons laws in Japan were not put in place for the people's safety. They were put in place initially so the shoguns had the monopoly on the weapons. Which is, by the way, why all these other countries, aside from the U.S., for the most part, have these restrictive gun laws. Because these other countries have governments too, and these governments are going to act in their interest and make sure that they're the ones with the monopoly on the weapons. Now, there are many people in countries like the U.S., well, I should say many people in the U.S. and the U.S. government that would love to see the American people disarmed. They would love to see the local, state, and federal governments have the monopoly on the weapons. And quite frankly, the citizens have nothing. The difference between the U.S. and all these other countries is that we have a little bit of a different culture. You have plenty of people in the U.S. who will put their foot down and say, no, no, we're not just giving up that easy. You want my gun, you can go fuck yourself. And I said I wasn't going to swear in this one, but here I am. But yeah, I guarantee you right now, if there was a national referendum on repealing the Second Amendment, banning all guns, and the caveat to this is that everyone who votes in favor of this bill gets issued an M16 and has to go door to door to confiscate everyone's guns. Well, they might vote in favor of it, but then they might change their mind after they actually get issued that M16 and like, hey, have at it, Haas. You know, David Hogg, I guarantee you the second you put that rifle in his hand and said, now go confiscate all those rednecks' guns. Well, I'm not sure if David Hogg would do this before or after, but I'm not sure whether or not he'd get the cold feet before or after the first place. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that he would be asking by the end of it, okay, look, let me just sign up for the NRA or something of that nature. A lot of these people in the U.S. that support all these gun laws and support taking people's guns away, they're doing so on the proviso that other people will do it for them. And then you get the ones with the crazy fantasies of, using F-16s and nukes and drones on people that aren't going to turn in their guns. And you get those people with those unrealistic expectations as well. So, again, yeah, other countries, the reason why they have the gun laws is not for the safety of their people, like a lot of gun controllers look it out. It's about government dominance. Let's move on to the second point now, since we've talked about the first point a bunch. That needs to be kept out of the wrong hands for a number of reasons. This is really not the strong argument that you think. Yeah, on the surface, sounds great. I mean, you don't want criminals getting guns and using them in crimes. I mean, but when you really start doing the deep dive into it and actually critically thinking about this and, applying reality here and common sense, I know gun controllers love to throw common sense around, but the fact of the matter is that nothing they say is really common sense when you start to actually think about it. Um, you might as well say, well, there needs to be no murders. The fact of the matter is that we live in an imperfect world. And honestly, there's another thing about this needs to be kept out of the wrong hands argument. How do you legally define wrong hands? You can go about it by, the only realistic way you can go about it is by magically making guns disappear because you're not going to have gun laws that make sure that guns are kept out of the wrong hands while simultaneously not taking them from the people that could use them or the people that aren't going to use them illegitimately. So, I mean, when you really think of it, I mean, and for those of you who believe that we need to keep guns out of the wrong hands and we can actually legislate this into reality, what laws are you going to pass to make sure that they happen? I want you to go in detail. Um, you know, we need to make a law that, keeps guns out of the wrong. What would those laws look like? What would the wrong hands look like? How are you going to put that into a legal definition? I mean, yeah, I mean, in each and every definition you give me, I can pick apart. And unless, of course, your suggestion is to say uh, make guns magically disappear, and then I'm just going to say, okay, well, you can't really do that, but I guess making guns magically disappear would keep them out of the wrong hands. It's just again not realistic. Now, the other bad thing about this argument is that you get a lot of people who will say, well, I don't think that person should have a gun. I don't think that person should have a gun. And really, it's just a suggestion. It's just more of a statement that they have a negative opinion of that person, rather than that person is actually a danger to themselves or others with that firearm. And a lot of the people who I've talked to who say we need to do more to keep guns out of the wrong hands, honestly, they are the ones that I see breaking the four cardinal safety rules the most. I was over at a friend's mother's house cleaning the gun that belonged to her husband up because they couldn't figure out how to disassemble it and clean it. So my friend said, "Hey, can you do this?" So I did. And it took me a little bit of figuring out, not too horribly much, because it's very similar to a firearm that my grandpappy had. So I did manage to figure it out. And as I was cleaning it, his mom comes in with a 38, points it in my face with with her finger in the trigger well, and I can see the four cylinders on the side. All of them had rounds in them, so I'm sure the cylinder covering the barrel and the one below it also had rounds in them. That's, at least three of the cardinal safety rules broken. And she said, that really they need to do more to keep guns out of the wrong hands, while ironically being that person. So, I don't know. So that's the other thing. Another argument I want to bring up with this, by the way, because there are gun controllers who, while trying to sit there and quote, own me in an argument, sit there and say, well, I don't think you should have guns. I don't think yahoos like you should have guns. Well, you just, showed me right there that this is really more of an animosity thing more than a concern for genuine safety. You just showed me that you don't want me to have my guns because, you know, I don't agree with your opinion. That's all you've told me there. That you're willing to take people's guns based on the fact that they won't go along with what you want done politically. So I think we beat that one into the ground for a little bit. Now let's start to the last one, gun skill. This is one that gets used in a very intellectually dishonest take by the gun controllers. Nobody denies guns can be used to kill. They're a weapon for the most part, unless you got like one of those double barrel shotguns that you just use for clay pigeon shooting or hunting, or maybe you've got a bolt action rifle that you use for deer hunting. Then it really, at that point, it is not a weapon. It's just a piece of sporting goods. Um, yeah, guns for the most part are weapons. You can use them to kill. You can use them to maim. You can use them to rob. You can use them to intimidate. Yes, you can do all that stuff with firearms. Nobody is denying, that you can't use. firearms illegitimately. That's the same about any item, really. Computers, cars, knives. I mean, now, there are gun controllers that look at me with the deer in the headlights look when I say there have been mass stabbings that have claimed more lives than some of our mass shootings. In fact, many mass shootings, depending on which definition you use on a mass shooting. You take an intellectually dishonest definition of a mass shooting, like what the Gun Violence Archive and organizations like them use, where it's just basically could have been some asshole firing randomly into the air and accidentally hitting four people, or some gangbangers doing a drive-by. Well, that gets counted as a mass shooting by the Gun Violence Archive. It's not what most people think about when they hear the word mass shooting. Most people, when they hear the word mass shooting, I presume, they think about the spree style killings like Columbine or Parkland or, say, Las Vegas. But by any of those definitions, well, there have been mass stabbings that have taken in the double digits of lives. Hell, the biggest mass killing that I know of, 9/11, well, that was carried out with box cutters, and that took over 3,000 people. Now, I know it was a little bit more complex than just box cutters. They obviously used the box cutters to take control of the planes and then fly them into buildings. However, you get the point. Um, Box truck attack in Nice, France. That took more lives than any mass shooting. The OKC bombing. That took more lives than any mass shooting. So, yeah, you know what? Guns are weapons. However, a lot of things can be used as weapons too, even though they weren't designed for. Furthermore, guaranteed, the vast majority of the people who manufacture firearms and sell firearms, they're not doing so with the intent to arm mass killers. They don't want their name tarnished by mass killers. They do everything in their power to try to not sell to mass killers. Sometimes mass killers slip through the fucking cracks. And I just cussed again. All right. So, anyway, yeah. Now, most gun stores, most firearms dealers, most manufacturers, they have a different audience in mind, different purposes in mind with their firearms. You talk about, say, Mikhail Kalashnikov, the designer of the AK. He wanted a better infantry weapon. He wanted to design a better infantry weapon. You want to talk about, say, Browning. He wanted to make firearms better. I mean, and, he's very much so revered in the firearms community. One person I don't think gets enough credit um, is a man by the name of Frank Nisoma. And he designed the P415, P416 series rifles. Basically, Frank Nisoma was born in Brooklyn. He's an aerospace engineer, and when he moved to Arizona, that's when he got into firearms. And he decided, how can I make the M16, M4, AR-15 style rifles even better? And that's where he created the P415, P416 series rifle. He was very much so pro Second Amendment, pro civilian ownership of firearms. He was hoping to make a better rifle for armed services. And Unfortunately, to my knowledge, only one private security, private military contractor actually bought any of their rifles, and that's just to my knowledge. There could have been more. I'm just aware of one. And unfortunately, I think the reason for this being is that Frank did quite a good job on his rifles, and he did too well of a job on his rifles. And plus they're a lot more expensive. A lot more craftsmanship goes into a rifle like this than you would get from most of your run-of-the-mill AR-15s that you see on the shelf. And unfortunately, I mean, not a lot of people want to spend over $2,000 on a rifle, on the baseline rifle. So I'm thinking that's why the rifle hadn't taken off quite so much unless you actually know about POS, which I could be mistaken, but these are great rifles nonetheless. So, with that being said, you get all these arguments from gun controllers. They keep on getting repeated. And when you talk to the average run of the mill gun control activist on the street, many of them don't know what they're talking about. Many of them have got the preconceived notion that guns are bad. And it seems like to them it would be a massive sin against their ideology to even so much as know a little more than guns are bad. That's what it honestly seems like to me, listening to them speak on the topic. So I'm going to wrap this up here. Folks, you have the comment section and you know how to use it. So let me know what y'all think. We'll keep this discussion going. Thank y'all for watching. Take it easy out there and have a great day.